Several recent papers have explored the relationship between metabolism and the likelihood of developing serious COVID-19 symptoms. We'll explore what those terms mean, as well as a set of things we can do to strengthen our own health on this episode of Shareable Science Beyond the Blog. Welcome to Shareable Science. Science you can share. So I'm going to talk for just a little bit about a topic that you might not have seen in the news. It isn't making headlines, but the data that I'm seeing suggests it is a worthy conversation for us to be having at this moment in time. So we're going to start with the concept of metabolism. So our cells need to do three key things in their function. They need to change food into energy. They need to use that energy to assemble the building blocks that allow them to do their job, and then they've got to get rid of the leftovers. That all falls under metabolism. When you and I hear metabolism, we often only hear it focused on here, like I have a slow metabolism, or here's 6 easy ways to boost my metabolism. But I want us to think about this more broadly, because the concept of metabolism is important to our overall health. And that's especially true for immunity. When our metabolism is off, it's harder for our body to appropriately defend against infection and then heal itself. So we're going to talk about a concept called metabolic syndrome, which is when metabolism is off kilter. But I want to start with the idea of what metabolism is. Now, let me show you some recent data from the Centers for Disease Control. And this has been in the news a lot, but I'm going to focus on just a subset of the information. So, this is the risk for hospitalization if you have any of these conditions and you become infected with COVID-19. So, for example, if you have type 2 diabetes, there's a 3 times the risk of someone who does not have type 2 diabetes, that if you get infected, you're going to need to be hospitalized. There are similar kinds of data for the likelihood that you would need to be on a ventilator or even for mortality. But we're going to focus on hospital numbers. So you can see type 2 diabetes, 3 times the higher risk. Hypertension, obesity, chronic kidney disease, and severe obesity. As I move down this list, the risk increases. And if you've got 2 of these, there's a higher risk. And if you have 3 or more, it's even higher. The point being, these sets of disorders throw off metabolism and make it harder for our body to fight disease and also then heal itself. These are errors of our overall metabolism. Now, before you say, well, I don't have any of these, so this is not something that I need to worry about, I want to call your attention to a 2018 study that found that only 12% of Americans actually had ideal levels of this set of markers, whether that's your blood glucose or your triglyceride and cholesterol or your blood pressure. Only 12% of us are ideal in all these. So even if you don't have one of these, odds are fairly good that you've got some biomarker in your blood work or when you step on the scale that is putting you on the road for at least one of these. So this is relevant for all of us. When we talk about the relationship between metabolic syndrome and health, we're talking about an umbrella term that includes type 2 diabetes or prediabetes, obesity, hypertension. All of these together put you at an increased risk for poor outcomes for COVID. All right, there's the data. Now let's talk a little bit about why this might put us at a higher risk of poor outcome. So there's a lot of theories, and I'm only going to hit these very, very briefly. But insulin resistance is a key one, and this is for individuals that are pre-diabetic or have type 2 diabetes who aren't able to appropriately regulate their blood sugar because their bodies are no longer responding to the signals that their insulin is giving them. Insulin resistance interferes with your ability to fight all kinds of infections. And it also can lead to an underlying level of inflammation where throughout your tissues, there's a low level of immune response. So you're just kind of on low alert across all of your body. We know that one of the challenges with COVID-19 is a hyperimmune response, an over-exaggerated immune response that leads to a cytokine storm and swamps organ systems. You don't want a hyperimmune response if you've already got an underlying level of immune inflammation. There are damage to the blood vessels if you have diabetes, if you have hypertension, if you have obesity, and there's an increased risk of clotting just on its own with those conditions. We know that COVID-19 brings an additional risk of clotting. So again, you don't want to set the table for a problem that COVID-19 is only going to make worse. And then this is a key piece that you probably haven't heard much about. At least with the flu vaccine, with the vaccine for influenza, there's a significant amount of data that individuals who are obese don't mount the kind of immune response that you would want. It's a weaker immune response. So taking the flu vaccine may not give them the same level of protection. We don't know if that's going to hold true for the coronavirus, and if individuals who struggle with their weight or any of these other conditions are going to have a challenge with the vaccine being effective. That's a big part of why phase 3 clinical trials for the vaccine need to cover so many different kinds of candidates. Okay, so with all this, what can you and I do? Because that's the reason why we're having this conversation. Here it is. You're going to look at this and go, really, Neil? That's what my doctor tells me every time. That's what I hear all the time. You're giving me these? Diet, exercise, control my blood sugar, quit smoking. Yes, I am giving you these. And I want to acknowledge right up front that it is not always a simple issue of, well, if you ate differently and exercised more, all of those issues would go away. I recognize that there are underlying factors that drive the appearance of some of those issues, and I don't want to oversimplify this. I also want to acknowledge that in the middle of a pandemic, it can be really challenging for people to have access to or the ability to pay for nutritious and healthy foods or to find time to get out and get exercise. But I'm telling you, if you can begin to build healthier habits, if you can lose a little bit of weight, if you can increase your level of physical activity, if you can get your blood sugar or your blood pressure under control with medicine or any other approach, and if you can quit smoking, you are setting yourself up for a healthier outcome. As the temperatures begin to cool, as we spend less time outdoors and more time indoors, where we know there's a higher risk of transmission, and as you and I head into the October through December gauntlet of Halloween candy, Thanksgiving goodies, and Christmas cookies, that's where the challenge comes. So if we can set healthier habits today, we can put ourselves in better shape if we get infected and when it comes time to take the vaccine. It's a lot of content with a relatively simple set of messages at the end, but I want you to hear that because I don't think we're getting that enough in our everyday news. I hope you find this useful. If you do, please share this with someone else that you think will also benefit from this. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Shareable Science Beyond the Blog, and I look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Take care.